Above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on KEVT Power Talk 1210 AM, Sahuarita, Tucson. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. The head of Parliament is calling his chamber into session for some rehearsals. Rehearsals and lessons in life and overcoming adversity. Lessons in love and lineage that harken back to Dixieland and ragtime and the most authentic players. My guest today is the brainchild behind the soul funk outfits Parliament and Funkadelic. These groups were a gumbo of Sam Cooke and Curtis Mayfield, Jimi Hendrix, Sylvester Stewart, and Jimmy Brown. They incorporated elements of Motortown and Northern Soul with black slave music to the Gulf Coast blues that were sweeping across the Southwest. Power horns, pulsating rhythms, and stories that soared, going up for the downstroke while my guest led the band. While staying original and creative, my guest was doing battle with the rigid and conformist record labels which looked to pacify and line their pockets. This is anathema to people like my guest who understand the traditions within music, the language and expression of harmony and melody, the rhythms of resistance that came from the islands during diaspora. As disco was infiltrating our country, my guest pivoted and started cutting out albums under his own name. His continued success and longevity is attributed to the relationships that he has built over time, musical relationships that feel good, so much so that he can get on the bandstand and crank out a 3-hour show with the likes of Fred Wesley, Bootsy Collins, or modern-day poets like Ice Cube. His legacy is firmly cemented in music history as an originator and entertainer. Yet he still burns inside with new ideas, new melodies, and mentoring those who rely on his caginess and wisdom to get on the good foot. George Clinton, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, man. How you doing?
Nice to hear you, brother.
Good to be here.
Yeah, man. Hey, did you ever cross paths with Wilton Felder?
Not that I know.
He was in the Crusaders, with Joe Sample and Styx Hooper.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So
Wilton. Stu Levine. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
He was their producer. Right, yes, I do remember him, yeah. Yeah, Randy Crawford, yeah, she was, all of that crew, that whole Jazz Crusaders crew. We was pretty close to him, but now that I think about it, you had to jog my memory for a minute. Yeah.
Because Wilton left us this weekend. He passed away, and I wasn't. I wanted.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So now, in the span of a year, we lost Joe Sample, Wilton, and Wayne Henderson. So anyway, I thought maybe. So it just, George, it's such an honor to talk to you. I wanted to ask you. I talked to James Gadsden, the drummer. He was down in Florida playing with Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, but the guy was a doo-wop fanatic. And I wanted to ask you, in that barbershop where you were growing up, what kind of tunes you were listening to and what you guys were singing in that barbershop.
Oh, well, during the barbershop days, Motown had started. Barbershop was like 60. That's when we really started running the barbershop, 61 and all. So Motown would have been all over the shop, Curtis Mayfield, like you said, and that would have been, the thing in the barbershop. But I was also working at the Brill building in New York at the time, so I would bring a lot of demos home from New York, from the Tokens and the different people that I worked with over in New York. We had a lot of demos, from the publishing Joe Bet music that I put on my jukebox. So we had a lot of homegrown stuff on the box too.
Can you talk about, because I think the regionalism of music was so palpable when you were coming up. Can you talk about some of the demos that you took home? I know you mentioned one of the bands, but these little outfits were just scintillating,
Oh, but back in that time, publishing was the thing. People came to the publishers to get their songs, so you had a chance to run into from Johnny Mathis to the Tokens to the Chiffons. Phil Spector was 2 doors down the hall. all Ike and Tina Turner, all of everybody, but everybody was on, Broadway during those days. And so you had a chance to meet, one of the stories I told in my book, Elvis. I watched him come to, get songs from Otis Blackwell. So from the 59 on, everybody you could have think of, was running up and down Broadway trying to get their songs together. Burt Bacharach, Dion, I grew up with her, so I watched her go from school right to Burt Bacharach and Al David and become Dionne Warwick that everybody know.
Wow.
I live right next door to her father's store in East Orange, New Jersey.
Wow. Can you tell me about, George, maybe you can answer this question, because I was talking to Ellis Marsalis, the father of the Marsalis brothers, and he was talking about the evolution of terminology. We had race records, but then that was considered,
That's hip-hop. That's hip-hop today.
And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, so what Ellis said was that race records was an offensive term. They got to change to rhythm and blues. And then And then Elvis started to sing, and his stuff was considered rhythm and blues, but when they found out he was white, they changed the name to rock and roll. Is there any truth to that?
Well, that seemed like the evolution of how they was trying to define it, and at the same time they was trying to make Elvis seem like a bad boy, like he was shaking. He wasn't shaking. I mean, if that was going to be the case, Jerry Lee Lewis would have been the king of all of that. Had it, on the real side of that style of rock and roll, Jerry Lee Lewis was the rockinest, the funkiest, but they needed a good image for rock and roll. Elvis was that image, and the race record thing was the records were pretty raw, pretty much like hip hop is today. Almost the same lyrics was you could use in before it became rhythm and blues.
Interesting.
And then it became urban. I mean, urban was much later, but it was rock and roll with Little Richard and Chuck Berry and all them was in it. And that became the big thing, rock and roll. And by the time it got to the European version of rock and roll, it became rock.
Prog rock. Yeah, that's right. Wait, so, yeah. But when, do you remember the first time that you heard the term rock and roll? I mean, I feel like genres. Yeah, go ahead. It
would have been Lightning Hopkins and Elmo James,
wow.
And all of them, Muddy Waters, all of them used the term rock and roll and like a Rolling Stone and all. They used all of those terms, But far as it become what we know as rock and roll, it would have had to been, with Chuck Berry, Bill Haley, Lou Rich, right in that era. It would have been Rock Around the Clock. That was when it had become rock and roll the way we recognize it, But Rock Around the Clock probably was the first pop version of it, But Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, that to me was the foundation for the rock and roll that we know.
Talking to George Clinton here, P-Funk, and could you talk about the studio cats that you were using on these demos? Like, was Everett Barksdale involved? Who were some of the cats that were your go-to?
Bernard Purdy.
Beautiful. Bernard Purdy. That's great.
That's when he named himself Pretty when he came home from the Army. that was his little sign in the studio, Pretty Purdy. Eric Gales. Winston, I forget Winston's last name. Richard T.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God! Yeah, these legends.
These were the demo guys. They were our version of James Jamerson and Benny Benjamin. At Motown.
Absolutely.
These was our Joe Bett demo. Cut the demos at A1 Studio. Herb Abelson, who owned Atlantic at first before the other ones. The musicians, oh, wow. those were the guys that did the demo. They became famous later on.
Right.
They became famous, all over the place.
Could you paint the picture for my audience as to, because it got to a point where by the 70s, Steely Dan and cats like that were getting $500,000 they were in the studio all day trying to perfect a song. But I get the impression with these demos that you were cranking out from the Brill building, you didn't have that much time. Can you put us inside there to talk about how you got through it, and not just that, but the music came out at very high quality?
Well, we were, like I said, we were doing demos for Motown at the time, and Joe Bett. We was cutting songs because Joe Bett was such a hot publisher. Everybody wanted a Joe Bett song. So we got, songs pushed, did demos on Motown songs and new songs from songwriters on the East Coast. So we did that all day, every day. We had writers in there, and they would give us a session. We can do 3 of our songs in the evening. George Kerr, who became head of Sylvia Robinson's label, he was our boss. Sidney Barnes, who become the lead singer of Rotary Connection, him and Minnie Riperton.
Wow.
All of us was kids at that time, and we was doing the demos, singing the song. Linda Jones made Hypnotize. She was one of the girls that sang the demos. Dorothy Moore. A lot of people became famous later on, but during that time, that's what we did all day long, just cut the demos and try to place them.
What was your role? Were you producing?
I was a songwriter, and we sang backgrounds for a lot of the demos. But as a songwriter, I worked with Gene Red. We did Soul Sisters and Inez and Charlie Fox.
Wow.
No.
Wow, this is great. Unbelievable. But I guess, what do you think, looking back on it, having the opportunity to do those demos, how do you think that you grew as a leader because of that stuff?
What happened with me, I learned so many different styles of music that by the time we were able to do Funkadelic, my thing was to create a group that I could do anything I wanted to do, and nobody would say, that's not his bag. That's not their bag. We didn't have a bag. We were a production company. Like Motown had a lot of bags, a lot of styles in one company. We thought of our group as a Motown, and I got that from being able to write for so many different people. All the different styles were valid, so I just changed styles whenever the styles change, fashion change. I just go back to one of the other styles I remember from the Brill building and do it in whatever period of time we were in with their sound. Like today's sound, I still can do doo-wop stuff. Like the new album I got out, the last album we did on First You Gotta Shake the Gate.
Mm-hmm.
I did songs on that album that I wrote back in those days.
Really?
As in and stuff like that. They were old styles, and I just brought them back with today's sound. That's what publishing is, to be able to do an old song with fresh, appeal. And most of the entertainers got away from that because they figured they have to write their own raps or songs. So that limit them to their period that they're doing the song, and nobody else is going to want to cover it because they feel like they have to write their own. So you cut yourself out with that style, that thought that you have to write your own song. There's a lot of different things you can do and put your brand on it.
Can you give an example of a song that you wrote or concocted 50 years ago that you put on that album recently?
Well, one of them is As In. It was done a long time ago. Even the song, it wasn't that long ago. Mathematics wasn't that long ago, but the style that I did it in was a style from the 50s. But I did songs on Funkadelic albums that I did 2 or 3 times. I did it in 1963. and that was You Can't Miss What You Can't Measure, and I forget the other title. I had another title for it.
It's hard. No, yeah. But you mean? Yeah, go ahead.
I did songs. I just changed the title and do them again 20 years later.
So you changed the title and the arrangements, and therefore...
Yeah, arrangement, and do it from today's point of view, which sometimes is a lot of just samples of a hook. They don't have as many lyrics as they did back in those days. So you just take a couple of lines out of it. You make electronic dance music record out of it.
Right.
And with samples, they sample a little piece of it and make a new record out of it. So when I saw them doing that, I started doing it myself. I sample myself.
George, Little Richard, at the end of the 50s, he found God. Elvis went to the Army. By the early 60s, I just want to get your take on where you were at as far as you talked about hearkening back and when you needed to think back to the styles and the Brill building, but wasn't soul, northern soul music really actually coming out at that time? Styles were actually being invented in real time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was just like the blues and rock and roll had taken from the early 50s up into the mid 60s before European caught on to it and came over here with Led Zeppelins and all of those rock bands. Northern soul was brewing in 1968 and 9. Northern soul was brewing in Detroit. I would say right before that, even 65.
Mm-hmm.
Northern soul music was brewing in Detroit in that local area, area. That was the foundation for Northern soul. People didn't know about it till years later, except for the people in Birmingham, Manchester, England. They knew what they were into. They were into those B-sides of Motown records that wasn't big hits in Detroit, but was Detroit records. I remember the girl Nancy Lewis coming to Detroit in '67, collecting all of those old flops, that we called them, B-sides, and taking them back to England. Kit Lambert, he was the guy that owned the record store over there, just like Virgin Records. Everybody was selling oldies. That's what they were doing with these Northern Soul records. And now it's becoming the big thing. It's becoming big pop music. You get new bands recording those old Detroit records and new songs that sound like that. You're going to get a bunch of new Led Zeppelins playing Motown and funk music, Funkadelic music in the upcoming years. That's what's happening right now. It's called Northern Soul, but there's going to be a new music coming out of that.
Oh, this is I'm not sure if it's all registering in my brain right now. The cats that you surrounded yourself with in your bands, like you mentioned before, Benny Benjamin, and you had
James
Jamerson. There's some other cats. George Bohannon was a bone player out in Motown, and there was just where can you talk about just even a couple like Bernie or any of these cats that how did you discover them in Detroit? Did you find them in the clubs? Because that
Oh no, Bernie was 13 years old in Plainfield, New Jersey. All of my band pretty much came with me to Detroit from Plainfield. Billy Nelson, Bernie, Eddie Hazel, Tyle Ross. The band was little kids right out of my barbershop.
Oh.
We didn't meet Bootsy and them till the 70s. That's when Bootsy, Fred Wesley, Maceo, and the James Brown section came in like 72. But the Funkadelics, they was right there with us as we started doing the demos. But they were, like 13 and 14 years old. They learned their instruments playing in the barbershop.
So can you talk a little bit about you would be if they all went with you to
we got a hit record, singer record, I Want to Testify.
In 67.
That was our first. We took the kids with us on the road. We took Billy Nelson first. He was the only one. And once we got there, we realized we weren't going to be a doo-wop group much longer because it was a new thing that rock and roll was seeping in. So we had to have our own band. So we went back and got Eddie Hazel, who was 16, and Tao. They all went to school together. And then Tiki was from right down the road, Philadelphia. And we went to Detroit, and they became the young, Jameson called them the Young Funk Brothers. That was Funkadelic. That was music for my mother. Boy, we went into not a blues thing, not a rock and roll thing, but that mid-tempo, like New Orleans. And we made psychedelic music out of that and called it Funkadelic.
All right, I want you to can you unpack this a little bit more? You didn't do the rock thing, and you didn't do the blues thing. You did the New Orleans thing and did the middle.
The mid-tempo.
The mid-tempo.
Rock and roll was mostly the up-tempo loud. That was the rock and roll version of the past era. And some of those rock bands did blues. Cream was Led Zeppelin and all of them. They had real good blues chops. So you had a lot of blues, Cream, they did a lot of, blues songs, Crossroad and stuff like that. We went for the mid-tempo that, get out of my life, woman, you don't love me no more. That real nasty music.
Like them, yeah.
The kind that make you want to shake your butt.
Free your mind and your ass will follow. I mean, I'm gonna say, yeah.
James Brown was the only one dabbling in that, and matter of fact, he got into it real deep to the funk side of it himself, and towards the end of the 60s. And he was like the funkiest thing there was. And so we did the same thing with a band, a rock band as opposed to just dance music. We did, rock and roll but funky, psychedelic but funky.
When you came out of the studios at night, can you talk about a couple of the legendary venues that you would play at in Detroit? Maybe just play for free so you could just cut it loose?
Oh, 20 grand was it. That's what we lived at. The
20 grand.
And there was a club that all of the top R&B acts came through. And we played that. And then the other one was the 876, which was for teenagers. And we would do the new Funkadelic style, music for my mother, woo-ha, hey, I bet you. That's when we became Funkadelic with the costumes and things, and made our own cult, along with Iggy Pop, MC5, Ted Nugent. We all had the same agent. So we played all these little teenage places. Motown was peaking at that time, 67 and 8. And rock and roll was taking over, so it was a new thing, and we were part of the new thing.
Well, we got a track of music here I wanted to play for you, and then we'll come back and break it down, okay?
Mm-hmm.
10. I think you know that song, Mr. Clinton, but that is... I wanted to ask...
For you, that song give me flashbacks.
Let me tell you something, man. I got to tell you, I mean, to me... I think this song holds up better. The messages in the song hold up better today than they did back then.
You know what? That's what the Chili Peppers say.
It's true.
They said, when I first met them, that was their favorite Funkadelic song, and that had let me know that I was right in what I was thinking. That when we did it, that I always thought that this song would be famous years from now because it's so out there that. In time, people will understand that this was the psychedelic era. We were just late doing it, but we overdid it just because we were late. Jimi Hendrix, the Cream, they all had done psychedelic music before with all of the panning and the feedback. But we overdid it just for that purpose because we were late. And we just, figured it hasn't finished yet because we ain't done our version yet.
Part of it, though, George, isn't it the point of view? I mean, the kingdom of heaven is within. Free your mind. Free your mind. I mean, that's philosophical stuff. I'm not even talking about the kind of We can get into the electronic sounds and.
Well, the sayings. I mean, to me, that all came from, we were tripping our ass off.
Yeah.
And being philosophical and being free, just letting it, whatever came out, and it made sense to me later. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was doing it, but just turning on and letting the funk be the pilot. And anything that came out of our mouths, we said it.
Can you? Yeah, go ahead.
It actually felt better to me later on when people started telling me that was a deep statement. I never thought about it when I was doing it.
Part of my show is about the metaphysical out of body, but I wanted to ask you, I've talked to a lot of the cats about mind expansion, consciousness expansion. When did you guys collectively as a group, the Funkadelics, when you came out, when did you guys start eating a lot of acid?
We got turned out in Boston the first time we went there. These little young girls, hippie girls, that was the new thing. Everybody was taking acid, running to Canada, we didn't know nothing about the war. That's how dumb we were. Right. We had one of the band members that went to Vietnam and got killed. We knew he was in the army, but we didn't know nothing about what that war was about. We had no idea. We was just trying to make music. But once you got to Boston and started seeing all of the hippie mentality, and we got educated in that whole thing, everybody running, like I said, to Canada, we trained and taught about the war. And at the same time, all the different acid, yoga, Maharishi, Beatles music, Jimi Hendrix, all of that hit us at the same time. And first, when Little Billy did it first, and we used to say, anything that could make him smile, we wanted. We wanted something, because he was a mean little ass.
And he was smiling ear to ear. Unbelievable.
He was smiling from ear to ear all the time, and we wanted to, what the hell was in that? So that was what got us all. I ended up staying there for another 40 years.
Well, but George, this is so important. How do you think? You can brush it off and say that it was right place at right time and all this other confluence, but how did it expand your consciousness? Because I just think that it's drugs. Yeah, go ahead.
When I look at it now, I'm amazed at how much something was in touch with us. Even around the drugs, would never use drugs as the excuse for, going in and doing anything or thinking about anything. But I know now, and there's no way in hell without the mind expansion of the acid days. That whole period stopped the war. That was, if it hadn't have stopped, they would have bombed it the same way we did Japan. That I know that now. I know that there was some expansion that had a lot to do with saving this planet. Woodstock. That was the end of it to me also, because from then on it went back to normal. But at that moment, if it hadn't have been for the mentality of kids 13 and 14 talking about peace, putting flowers in the guns of soldiers, we would have been in real trouble. I know that only that for that moment, acid was what it was for. But because it didn't work after that, believe me, you could take all the acid you wanted, you start having bad trips and shit. After 71, it wasn't no more fun. It was just like any other drug. You overdid it, it either stopped working or you was in trouble, period. Most with acid, it just stopped working. You just would stay up and it wasn't no more tripping, nothing. And, after Woodstock, everybody started, telling you, my son is in the Vietnam War, he's fighting for your country, and you run right here. You was a drug addict after Woodstock. You was a acid head, a dope addict after that. Before that, everything was beautiful. People would help. Oh, he's tripping. They were mindful of your head. They say, don't, stay out of his space. Don't, blow his mind. He's tripping. People was polite with you. But after that, it was like, you jerk, you dope addict. and it ended.
I mean, you want to say
people went on from there,
right?
Trying to find new versions of it.
But it's somehow I can understand being a dope addict or an acid head or whatever, but how does that make you unpatriotic, though? I mean, that to me doesn't compute.
Because a lot of people thought, since you was against the war,
right,
that you was against the country,
right.
But like Jane Fonda, we knew that something wasn't right about our position in that war, and ain't nothing wrong with telling the truth if that's what the truth is. Somebody got to tell it. And the kids was the one that was telling it. So it made a lot of the old patriots who didn't know enough of that they would stand up to the government at that time. They just figured you're supposed to do everything like a nationalistic point of view, one point of view. The kids said no. And only kids could have said it. Anybody else would have got shot like they did, at Kent State. Once you got too old, once you got past 15, that was dangerous to do. You could do that up until like 15, 16. You can get away with that. But after you got a young adult, you couldn't do that. You was a traitor and everything else.
Did you come close to losing your life ever?
No. I don't know no time that I felt in trouble, even with the drugs. It wasn't that dangerous until after Woodstock. Once it got after Woodstock, then you had to worry about what's in the drugs.
Right. No. Okay. No. I'm just asking, not the drugs. I'm just saying, did you ever come out or feel like you were advocating for the truth and ever got into an altercation with somebody who thought you were
No. We people always thought we were crazy. We were
you are
anyway.
Crazy, man. It's good. It's a good thing.
So nobody never thought of us as terrorists or traitors or political. They just thought we was a bunch of crazies. And, I guess the system they probably got some dossiers on us because, when we did America East is Young,
right. I
can't imagine saying nothing like that today and without the police being on your back, on your doorstep.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that a record company, it was marketed and it was, and it did well. I mean, to me, it's like that. I guess, George, the question I have is that LSD was legal in the mid-60s. I mean, you could go to certain places and get it.
It actually came from the school. Delirium was professors.
Right.
They did that. They did that, and it was tune in, turn on, and drop out.
Right.
They made it illegal after they was going to use it in the army for warfare. Once they got out there and they saw that it did other things, then they had to make it illegal.
And then all of a sudden, people got their hands on certain strands of it, and then you'd wind up getting dirty acid, and you weren't sure if it was bad.
Right. Once it became for sale, see, because before that, it was always share.
Right.
You got it. They would give it to you at the school, or it was sharing. Just the experience. But once it became, you want to buy a tab, $20 a lid. Once drugs became like that, once money got involved in it, then you should look. You know what capitalism is? It's about making profit.
Right.
So when that becomes the case, if you could think clearly, you'll know that somebody's going to cut it just to make some money. That's normal in business. That's what messed it up. Once it becomes for sale, then you got that entrepreneur people in it going to put anything in it just to stretch it and make more money. That's when it becomes dangerous, and you start having bad trips and all of that. And then being illegal. Then they made it illegal. That makes it twice as bad because now it's illegal. That means there's more profit to be made if somebody deal with it, and you're gonna get robbed, and you're gonna steal to get it. All those things come into play once it's illegal.
Can you talk about? Did you perform a lot tripping? Was there any memorable time where
all the time?
All the time. This is. I mean,
I look at some of the pictures. Some of the pictures now of the shows and Afterlife myself, because we were tripping our ass off, and the audience was too. But for some reason, it stayed together, it stayed in tune. It wasn't like the craziness that you would get on some, drugs that came out later, like the angel dust and the stuff like that,
sure.
PCP. Once that came out, then, you started seeing people that couldn't even tell what their guitar was. It looked like an animal to them.
I mean, is there a? I mean, it's obviously it's hard to remember exactly in the real time, but I mean, did you have? Can you talk about a memorable? I mean, I think it's remarkable that no matter how pure it was, the fact that you were able to really compose yourself and put together a solid show. Is there a time that stands out that you could talk about when you were facing and somehow it was just like it turned into either a live recording that came out on LP, or you guys were all like, I don't know how we got through that because we were all out of control. Is there?
Well, I mean, there's one show that's out on LP in this Funkadelic in 1969 in Pontiac, Michigan, or somewhere around there that I listened at, and I remember that we were tripping out. Well, Free Your Mind album, that whole album, first of all, we were tripping out.
Oh, I love it.
But the shows, there's a couple of shows that I could tell that we were on. There are a couple of them that should have been messed up, but for some reason people still thought it was all right because it was Funkadelic. But somebody put some Angel Dust in a joint, and we did the show, and I think I played the entire show, and then when it ended, I went right back to the first song. And since our band play according to whatever I do on stage, they follow me. They weren't even looking. They weren't even paying me no attention. They just followed me right to the first song again, and we were starting the show over again until I fainted.
Wow. You know, I mean, George, real straight up question. I mean, you talked about the door shutting. Well, actually, you talked about the marketability of drugs like acid, and then obviously after Woodstock, things fundamentally changed. But just from your perspective, working with cats like Ice Cube and Kendrick Lamar, and I mean, do you feel that our freedom of expression, are we more of an open society today, or are we more closed-minded in 2015, in your opinion?
With the exception of this, like you said, those two you just named, who have the balls and the artistic, metaphoric, ability to do it. Most people, you aren't allowed to do things like this, say things like we open society and freedom of speech. Hip hop was, and it was pretty much long as you were doing it to each other, long as you were ragging each other, dissing the bitch or dissing the sucker MC, it's okay to almost say anything, but guaranteed that what Kendrick Lamar, when you started messing with social and political type of information, they're going to find something to fuck with you about. And I'm thinking they're going to mess with Kendrick Lamar pretty soon because he's one of the ones with the ability and the balls to say what needs to be said.
Can you talk to my audience in Southern Arizona, all over the world about not specifically because I don't think the video has been released yet, but what is he getting at? What is he touching? What is he hitting on that's going to be so sensitive?
I mean, with his album, I'm talking about his album.
Mm-hmm.
His album, yeah. He talks about everything, but he uses himself as the one that he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He talking about himself being, as if though he was a Crip or Blood, ready to kill his own black brother for a color, but yet still he want to be with Marcus Garvey, Malcolm, with the associations of race.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he's vulnerable to actually wanting to kill somebody blacker than him. You know what I'm saying? So those things, he used himself as one of the metaphors, but he still made the statement that a lot of us are out here like that. We'll talk one thing, but at the same time, we'll do it to ourselves. And that's black and white.
I know.
And, you can't make statements about certain people because certain people have, been treated so bad that you can't say nothing else bad about them, even if they done something bad.
No, I mean it's a walking hypocrisy. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean that's the world we live in, and with the TV and the news, they run whatever news is being presented to us. So we all pretty much live within a box that we're put in by just what information we're allowed to hear. I mean, we don't know why certain people are so pissed off at certain things, because we don't realize they don't get the same information that we're getting.
Right.
And we don't get the same information that they're getting. But at the same time, we don't know why they're so mad they want to do this or they do that. And that's because we don't really know each other in the media and big business. Make sure that we don't be that aware of each other, because it's profitable to deal with, poor and uneducated people about the world.
That's right. That's pretty well articulated. Did Malcolm X get off on Funkadelic?
Well, I'm not sure at the time. What was that? We was gone. We was out of our mind. But I'm sure he did. Everybody did.
But I mean, did you have can you talk about some luminaries, either in athletes or politicians that used to get off on your shows?
Oh my God! I put it like this: when the Lakers, when Kareem was there and Magic was coming, Magic showed up with his boombox playing Knee Deep, and that was his theme. Kareem's was One Nation Under a Groove.
No way.
So
that's
so they had
great.
That was their little thing about Funkadelic and Parliament. And then there's just so many people that pretty much all of them, like Michael Jordan. He's a Q Dog. The Q Dog, that's a fraternity, black fraternity, and Atomic Dog is their national anthem. So you're gonna find a lot of the major basketball players, football players that are Q Dogs is going to be a Funkadelic, a Parliament fan to no end.
George,
a lot of politicians.
I'm talking like early '70s, like in Detroit. Did a lot of politicians come? I mean, it was a bubbling factory of music, fusion music. And I'm just curious, if which politicians were coming out to see your shows?
Oh yeah, John Conyers.
Wow, Johnny! I love him. Yeah.
No,
wow.
He's been a Funkadelic fan since his college days.
Oh my God, John Conyers! I love it. Hey, George.
Oh yeah.
I'm having such a ball with you. Can you? One of the L's on my show is love, and I just wanted you to talk about how you bring love to people. What is your concept of love, and how you bring it to the world?
Well, I mean, to me, fun. If you can, fault is the easiest thing in the world to find. I put it like that. You can find fault. That's why hip hop is so easy to diss each other, because it's harder to get somebody a compliment and have an edge on it. Fault is easy, but I'm saying love is, you have to be in that late 60s, the Beatles and the Jimmys and all those songs of people who, Bob Dylan's and Smokey Robinson, people that was poetic. You have to see that and then feel that, and I believe that stuff, even when it's the roughest of times, that stuff's still true. If you can make a smile on your face even when you're feeling bad, you feel better. And they ain't got to be no mushy.
Right.
It's just easier to love something because it's unconditional. I don't change my mind because it don't react the way I want it to react. My love is for me. It ain't got nothing to do with it.
Do you feel like that you make a point in your shows now, because you are dealing with younger generation? I was born in '78, so I was not a Sergeant Pepper. I didn't go through that time, but I still have it's about feel. And as we move into
can feel it.
I can feel it, and as we move into the digital age even more, and the imbalance becomes even greater with digitization, and there's less feeling. do you feel an onus at your? To me, it's just important for cats like yourself, especially when you're out on tour, is to talk about love in these kinds of ways, because I'm worried about younger generations. Most of the reason I'm doing my show is for my daughters, is just so they know how real music is made. And I just wonder if how you feel about that.
I mean, it's the closest thing to me that you can do is try to get a vinyl record and let them hear some of the warmth in the vinyl. Yeah, right. But as far as changing their version of what they do, you just have to pray for them and hold them, be there with them, because they're going to do the same thing we did. They're going to do just what we don't want them to do. That's what kids do. And we just have to be there with them because the more you tell them not to, that's what they're going to do. They're looking for the things you don't want them to do. To me, that's what I say. You got to be really careful about saying no. No is the greatest turn on that ever was. No is the greatest aphrodisiac that ever was. No is almost like saying yes.
Right. No is yes.
No is yes. It ain't really. You can't say, I thought they mean yes, but you tell a kid no, he wants to know why, because that's thinking for you. You tell somebody no, they want to know why, and they have to prove it to themselves why. I mean, it's a shame because I'm scared for them, just like our parents probably were scared for us.
One final question for you, Mr. Clinton, in part one here. I just love talking to you, man. But did you ever get a chance to hang with Miles Davis?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me a good Miles story before we go here?
Oh, Miles, you got to see Miles Davis and Sly Stone.
Oh, yeah.
Together.
Man.
You can't get probably as creative and genius probably as those two. But at the same time, they both try to look like they try to outdo each other with their ability to get out of my face. And they would do it with each other. And it's so to the point that it was so funny because they didn't mean it. That's just the way they talk.
Sure.
And that's only them is the only two people I know that Miles could be at a show and play a show with his back to you. And people still love him. And he can curse everybody out, and they still love him. He is that good. Sly, I've seen him be at a show and didn't come out to play. And people standing outside slapping five, talking about, told you that moment wasn't going to be here.
Yeah.
They slapping five, high-fiving the fact that they was at a show that he didn't show up. That's how they still love him that much, that was still cool. And everybody else that try to do that look real bad, trying to be a superstar, that not cool with the fans. Most people get in trouble doing that. Those two, I don't know what it was they can get away with. And people still love them, be mad as hell at them, but still love them.
George, we're going to wrap it up here. If I can get some kind of contact for you, I'll send you an audio copy of this interview. I had a ball, and next time I missed you when you came through Tucson, but just continued success, man, and just keep pushing the envelope.
Thank you,
and thank you for everything, man. I really dig it.
Thank you. You got the address. My daughter, Chrissy.
Oh, by the way, you better keep her around. She is quality person. She's quality people. All right, she's a good person.
My baby.
She's a good person, man.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Clinton, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Peace.